contemplating in that environment. And what's also happening, in my view, is that technology is starting to create these opportunities for the preforming of ideas, and that preforming is creating an opportunity for another kind of craftsmanship, which is the testing and simulating and optimizing of the resulting designs. So if you look at this project, the Bird's Nest in Beijing, which is getting lots of play on TV right now, this thing is actually a pretty elegant idea that's extremely engineered with a high degree of both design and execution and craft. Because the structure itself had a sort of philosophical idea, but it's heavily optimized to support the process, that the physical process and the functional process that it's structured around. And this is why, for example, you see the insertion of concepts of structural engineering craft into the discipline of architecture. The structural engineer on a project like this, or CCTV, or the water, what do they call that thing, the water cube? Those were all deep collaborations of representation, structural optimization, and simulation by two disciplines who are now incorporating this new concept of craft and risk at the same time. And so I think really what's happening now is this redefinition of the problem, this redefinition of what craftsmanship is in design, is creating a set of opportunities that didn't actually exist before. This is some student work presented at Yale this past semester in Greg Lynn's studio, and I couldn't find a picture of this, but this kid actually built a model, this young emerging architectural professional, actually built a model of this scheme, which took an enormous amount of craftsmanship, not the physical model, but the actual figuring out of this thing, which is a building. 25 years ago, when I was that kid sitting in that same studio, craftsmanship was pushing a Prismacolor pencil, right, and knowing how to use a blueprint machine. So the whole concept, the whole construct, has now been sort of remediated, and that allows you to expand the definition of craft and the risk of craft to the exploration of kind of new and provocative ideas and new and provocative forms, which pushes the sort of innovation envelope. In fact, I think those two ideas are tied somewhat together. Somehow, if you're going to take the responsibility to exercise your mind at this level of risk, it better be pretty innovative. This particular student is extremely skillful in the manipulation of forms. It was unlikely that he was going to produce a 4-story masonry building with stuccoed, frames and white shutters and so forth. So the nature, in my view, the nature of innovation, and the opposition of craft and risk is going to change pretty fundamentally because of the nature of craftsmanship with digital technologies. So what I'd like to suggest therefore in that context, and I want to use some work by Karen Timberlake to illustrate that, is that craftsmanship now in the context of the practice of architecture, which is this concept of ideation at the scale of a building and execution at the scale of a building, really is now going to fall into 3 categories. There's process craftsmanship, which is how do I figure out how to make all these pieces work. There are a set of skills that accumulate over time about how things piece together. This is Karen Timberlake's Loblolly House, which is an entirely pre-mediated, digitally designed, prefabricated, assembled project. The building itself was assembled in 6 weeks in the field, and the whole project was conceptualized in 3 dimensions using the kind of tools that we make possible, and then diagrammed as a construction problem. So that makes the craftsmanship issue become one of a set of skills around how things are actually assembled, not just their intent. And then finally, there's going to become craft around what I would call the delivery approaches, which is figuring out how to make all the pieces work so you can actually get a contractor or a set of contractors to go out and make this stuff happen. That kind of craft, it's coincidence and excellent that David is sitting next to me, because these guys are actually the Zen masters of that particular problem, in my view. So you've got this process issue, you've got this new set of skills, and you have this craftsmanship issue around delivery issues. And so I guess finally, here's my design team trying to figure out how my ceiling in my lobby is going to work, and they've resorted to these images and textual explanations and traditional architectural drawings to try to explore both ends of this problem, because at the same time they're figuring out how these shapes work, they've got to explain to me as the client how this thing is working, and the design problem has actually gotten kind of bigger. So I'll end with this image shamelessly stolen from Metropolis magazine of Rick down the table here, and Erwin Howard, who was one of my teachers when I was an undergraduate. You know, these guys are now struggling with digitizing processes that Erwin understood extremely well in, what would you say, 1960 or 1961? 1950, right? So he was exploring a set of digital issues and has now transferred his craftsmanship problem from how do I cast these things to the devilishly complex question of executing details. And I think, particularly in my role as a technologist, we presume that we make tools that let you do just about anything, and it turns out that craftsmanship is required to actually make that happen. I don't really think it's true. So with that,